Good morning, everyone. Today is Tuesday, October 4th, 2022, and today's subject for our public training is state-created resources for the v3.5 transition. Very excited about this today. And my job is super easy today. I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over to Lori.
Thank you, Chris. And my job's pretty easy today, too. I'm here to introduce 6 of our state data managers, and well, I should say 5 state data managers, 1 independent agent who's agreed to join us today as well. And the purpose is just that we have seen several of you have shared with us documents and resources you've created within your state as you've gone through this version 3.5 transition process. And we don't want you to have to reinvent the wheel. We want to share these resources and make sharing those as easy as possible. So we've got a great lineup today of some people who've created resources that I think you will find very valuable. And let's jump in. We're going to start with Ella in Wisconsin. Ella's a newer state data manager, and she created a gap analysis that she shared with me on a call, and I thought it would be helpful to have her share it with others. And then let me say as well, we plan to post these resources after today on the NEMSIS website and make that available for everyone who's interested. So we do plan to do that. Ella, do you want to share? I'll stop sharing here if you would like to share your document and explain it a little bit.
Sure, thank you. I think I need to get permissions to share. There we go.
Perfect, thanks.
So my name's Ella. I'm from Wisconsin. I'm super new. Just started the role end of March. So the last couple of months has just been me kind of drinking from the fire hose and trying to figure everything out. And I did look at some of the information that NEMSIS put out, and just to organize things a little bit better for my own brain, I created this spreadsheet for myself. And so I'll just go over really quickly kind of how I categorize this. So columns, I'll go to one that's a little bit more busy. So I've basically taken out all of the different categories and then just put them in their own tab, their own sheet in Excel. A through E is, or B through E is what our state currently has in our own data dictionary, the version 3.4. And column A is just for our notes. So I've been meeting with our state data subcommittee, and we've just been kind of discussing the data elements. And then columns F through the rest. That's what NEMSIS has posted for the new 3.5 data dictionary. Anything that's highlighted in yellow is not currently required for our state specifically. So if anyone feels like this is helpful and wants to use it, I would just take out all of the yellows because those are specific to Wisconsin. And that's pretty much it. So they're just out here. It's helpful for me to organize for myself. I don't know if it'll be helpful for anyone else, but if it is, feel free to use it. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. And I know she found this useful in having conversations with others in her state as they decided what they would require as a state, looking at what's optional and what's required and having conversations along those lines. So thanks for sharing that, Ella. Next up, we have Chip from New Hampshire, who also has created, I believe it's a PowerPoint presentation that he's going to share with us.
Let me get myself unmuted and see if I can do a share here. I'm looking for the share option. I'm so used to Teams, I'm getting a little, there it is.
Yeah, you got
Just found it. Okay. And all right, so you seeing a PowerPoint presentation here?
Not yet.
And how about now? Oh, there we go.
Yes, now we see it.
Okay. I am, let's see if I can do it with the slideshow without totally losing you guys. Just try to do. All right, can you still see it?
Yes, we see it full screen now. That's perfect.
Great. So basically, this idea was percolating for me for quite a while, because in the last, really the last year or two, there's been a lot of discussion about 3.5, obviously, but most of the discussion seems to fall on e-disposition 12 changes or UUID. And not a lot of discussion has happened with the other aspects of the changes. And when we sat down with a committee looking at disposition changes, we realized that there's no way to really change those without doing a better job of describing the whole incident. So this slideshow is out there for you guys to use, modify, change your logo, whatever. But it's also for pretty much anyone from you guys all the way down to your stakeholders to really get that this wasn't just about the 12. So, and again, I'm just describing broader vision here. What were the goals, which was really kind of improved some things that were limitations in 3.4, and be able to just better describe the calls overall. These are the things that we were trying to answer, or how you really describe a whole EMS event effectively, not getting into patient care, like details of procedures, meds, all that stuff, just like being able to really kind of categorize the call and give us sorting, filtering points, and handles for manipulating the data. These are what we determined were some really key areas in there. So I'm going to go through these quickly without necessarily giving the whole presentation, because you guys can read that later, and you probably have. So I identified some things that really needed to improve from previous versions that just, I don't know about you, but I found some limitations in trying to work with the data. And so we really hope that these changes improve that area. So this is just identifying those particular ones. And just some, here's the changes. So the type of call, and this basically kind of compares what it was and what it is now, so people can see at a high level real quickly what's modified, and hopefully get the idea of some of the benefit. I don't know if I put a big flag on it, but I did say that some of the dispositions got broken out into other ways to describe it. So type of service requested, you can get a little more detail from transporter organs and body parts and things like that. Tells you a little bit more about the type of call right up front, and that was one of our goals. The resources were broken out a little bit more better. This absorbed that e-response 15, which was a really confusing field for providers to fill out. It was like level of service you had, but what did you do kind of thing, which was really helpful to researchers, because we don't send e-crew, 02 or 03 to NEMSIS, so they don't know what the crew levels are. But it wasn't really that helpful to us in the services. So this kind of took away from that, moved it over here, and it's a little bit more specific about what it is you're going with. Strangely, I'll talk about this a little later in a different project. I realized when I was talking about a boat transport scenario, boats don't quite fit in here. So it's probably going to be one of the extended data definitions we'll have to deal with. But, these things will come up over time. But again, this is a lot more specific and flexible at the same time. The dispositions, you can see really how much, patient contact was soaked up a whole bunch of the other values that we had to put into some of our business validation rules, schematrons, et cetera, just to kind of say that we had patient contact. So you can really see how it rolls up and simplifies some of these things. Similarly, kind of going through some of the same scenarios. This going back to early on, we haven't really discussed this, but patient dead on scene is covered under either cardiac arrest or obvious death. So we don't really need to say it here, because we're already filling that stuff out in other places. And it's, I don't know, I think I always thought it was a little redundant to say that they're dead on scene when we said they're in cardiac arrest, and we either did resuscitation or we didn't, and they were obviously dead. So we don't really need to repeat that sort of thing. Let's see, did we go? Yeah. Same kinds of things here. We just kind of broke this out. Now, this was based off of sort of my analysis and early things we did. Some of this may shift a little bit as we go through extended data definitions and find use cases. Some things obviously could apply in several places depending on the use case you come up with. So these were just sort of my best guess on these things. So the key field here is transport is about the incident, not about this crew. The other ones are about this crew. E-disposition 27 through 29 is what did this crew do? This last one is about was the patient transported if there was a patient. So it doesn't matter if this crew did it or another crew did it or whatever. Then that's what this one is about. And I think we need to clarify it a little bit better in our extended data definitions. Ultimately, refusal is just a useful field, better describes things. It covers things like law enforcement, where there was actually a disposition, patient treated, transported by law enforcement. Well, the reality is that's a patient treated and a refused transport, and law enforcement happened to take them wherever it is they took them. But from our standpoint, it's a refused transport by EMS. So this covers some of those areas where they can go in there by law enforcement or by other means. Again, this is sort of the other split out of response 15. So we're actually being very specific about the care actually provided per your local protocol, which you guys probably know from these definitions. And again, that was a big hang up early on, like, well, what is ALS care? Well, ALS care in New York may be different than ALS care in New Hampshire based off of what the protocol is. So this is per whatever your local protocol is, the crews ought to be able to know what is ALS care based off your protocols. Initial final patient acuity, I think we added in one field in here about dead with and without resuscitation efforts and acute routine. And these are two new fields that we added. If you're using ImageTrend, these have been available for a while as IT fields. But we don't, the data set's always been really great for 911 calls, but not so great for transports. And this gives us a place where justification for transfer is a text field. So the idea being that I've got my PCS form, what did the sending provider put on the transfer order? That's what I write down here. And then the second part is really kind of more for us to categorize these calls so we can do evaluation of the types of calls that are going for interfacility transfers, for your transfer patterns, that kind of thing. So that was the combination of these two items that helps out a little bit more, along with the type of destination. So we expanded the type of destination a little bit. There was some needs for that, especially after like hurricanes and things. And that also goes back to the type of service. Here we go. So this was another area that was confusing. So somebody, I think it might have been Georgia, had hurricanes and they were moving people, but there wasn't a good way to say how you're moving them. You just get interfacility transport. So this was able to better define for crews, because I don't know about you, but this is always confusing for people, these two things here, and they mostly get it wrong. And we've done labeling in New Hampshire, but that doesn't help with third parties. So this helped in combination with those other two fields at the end and type of destination to better describe transfer information. So, and I think that might be the last item there. And these were just a quick summary of things that had a change to them. Generally, values were added to these. Otherwise, they didn't change. These were fields that we kind of changed the name of them a little bit, or the description was modified, or the recurrence of that field. So it wasn't necessarily a substantial change, but it was a little change somewhere. And then these are fields that were either added or removed completely in the new system. So, or were replaced. So this is kind of a big summary on the end here, just to share with your folks. And a little bit of demotion and promotion there. Some of this may not be relevant to stakeholders, but it might be helpful to your directors or other sort of high-level decision makers for your system. So essentially, that's it on this particular presentation, just to kind of help expand the scope of what people need to know, or that you can share with them, so we get beyond it's e-disposition, because it's not e-disposition. One other thing I share that it's a work in progress that I'm almost done with is I've been going through case scenarios. So just my working sheets here. I've got about almost 70 case scenarios that I've been going through, and the green means that I've gone through it and vetted it, trying to come up with things that might occur. Some of them are very strange, like we actually had a 1,000-pound patient get put on a Chinook helicopter that came to a hospital, LZ on a hospital bed, and the EMS crew went with them to move him somewhere because nobody had an ambulance big enough to move the patient. So I just came up with a lot of scenarios that I've heard about or seen or otherwise as case scenarios, and I'm mostly done with them. I've got a few more to do, and then we have some mobile integrated healthcare stuff that our MIH folks are going to look at real quick. I'll be happy to share that when I'm done. One thing I did for my sanity is I made 2 sheets that are printable on a page of just the values, so I can go back and forth for a quick reference that I'm going to use, and other descriptors in here. So, and that's pretty much what I've got for my goodies to share.
Thank you so much, Chip. That is a really, really great resource. I can see that being used in other states as well. So thank you. And next up, we have Beth in Vermont. And she created, I know, some documents for clinicians and field level providers, as well as some other things she wanted to share.
Yeah. So Chip, I don't know why I'm going after you, because now, oh my gosh, I have so much to live up to. Your stuff is amazing, but I will do my best to try to be at Chip's level. So yeah, with everything in Vermont, it's just me. I have an assistant data manager, but he mostly handles things such as password resets. So nothing too complex or crazy. So yeah, me. With this, I'm sharing my screen right now. You guys should see our website for state EMS system. This is going to be all adjusted. I found out this morning that I will have rights to be able to change things around, but in our website, excuse me, I've posted 5 handouts for our providers that were finished yesterday and uploaded this morning. So short turnaround time. But with these handouts, these are all designed for providers to read. There is a high-level summary of changes for people to look at. And this just kind of goes through everything. I separated all of the items into 3 categories. Very subjective, I have to admit. What I personally believe would be a very high impact to providers on a regular basis. What I think providers may find on some calls, but maybe not all. And then if anybody notices the low impact changes, my mind is going to be blown. I don't expect that to happen. So in Vermont, we do call our system Siren. So that's just a local name. You'll see that throughout the entire handout. But with all of this, I've included how much of an impact it is, what type of change, the field name as it displays within our system. So this will not necessarily match the national name, where it's located in the incident record, and then what changed. And everything is laid out so that as providers move through the incident record, as if they were documenting a call, it follows that path from the top down. So yeah, high level summary of everything that will be changing for providers. I also have split out the different levels into high, medium, and low to kind of get into more detail as far as what was actually changed. So with the high impact items handout, I've specifically designed this so that way if providers only read one thing, then they can turn to the high impact items handout. I know when I was a provider on the street, if someone sent me 5 files that were extremely long, I probably would not read all of them. So I expect a lot of that to be occurring within the EMS community. So to kind of prepare for that, that's why I'm kind of encouraging people to look at the high impact items, if nothing else. And this is just stuff that I, again, expect everybody to run into on a majority of incidents. So in here, it's just the type of change, the location, whether or not the section or field is required or mandatory. Again, up here, it's the name of the field or section as it appears within our run form. So not the national value, just because the providers in the state level won't necessarily be able to make that connection with the national value. So for them, it would hold no value. Some screenshots, and it just, again, goes through as if someone is navigating through the incident record. With all of these handouts, like I said, these were published this morning. We have a newsletter that's going out to all providers, I believe tomorrow, with all of this information as well. And then the final thing that I've done is actually created a demo environment and provided credentials for providers to use. So this will be available on our website. Right now, it's just in the handouts that all providers will have access to, but it will be available also in the documentation portion of our EMS website, so that anybody from anywhere can go in and can test out the incident record and just kind of see how moving through this process works. So that way, when they do transition over, it won't be as huge of a shock. People are definitely welcome to go in and poke at things. I certainly don't mind. As anybody will be able to see these incident records, I would just kind of be aware of that. But beyond that, anybody is welcome to poke and take a peek. So those are the resources that I have made available at this time. I don't know if there's questions that I can answer or anything like that.
That looks good. Beth, do you want to post a link to that page in the chat, just in case people want to check that out?
Oh, there's the stop sharing button.
Lori and Beth and everyone else, is it possible when we post these on the NEMSIS site that we try and post them in an editable format, whether it's Word or PowerPoint or Excel or whatever, so that we can take the idea and maybe modify it for our states?
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. Yeah, and some non-PDF, more editable version. All right, let's move on to Anne from Arizona. Also has some resources she was willing to share.
Oh, sorry, I couldn't unmute myself for a moment, and I thought, oh no. Can you hear me? Okay.
We hear you. Thanks, Anne.
I've got a bunch of things going on right now. And so I'm actually outside in my backyard. So you may hear birds and occasionally an airplane. And I apologize. So let me know if you can't hear very well. So I'm going to, let's see, share screen. Yeah, just like Chip, I'm like, which one is it? So let me show you. It should be this one, I hope. Yes. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes. Yeah, okay. That's good.
And we do have this posted along with some other resources for our state that, a lot of them are somewhat state specific, but just, we have them on our public facing website also. And we have a special little tab dedicated to 3.5 information so that agencies can easily, hopefully find all the 3.5 information if that's what they're on our website for. In the, our registry is called AZ Peers. So if you hear me call it AZ Peers, it's our EMS registry. So the resource that I developed is sort of a checklist. It is meant as a tool to allow primarily for EMS agencies, not for states, but it would be something that states could give out or maybe even a vendor. and it's meant to give ideas and things that you might want to check. It's not, all the things aren't going to apply to everybody. How can I explain this? There's 7 different segments to this. And somebody was talking about an editable format. I'm happy to try to provide that. I did this in Canva, which is a free program you can download. So I think I can share it that way, but I think you'd have to download Canva to edit it. So the first segment is what I called the pre-transition preparation. So these are all recommendations of what an agency should think about doing prior to starting the transition process. So the first thing is contact your vendor, find out when they plan to be, their product will be available to you, the timeline, and also optimized depending on, if you really want to be an early adopter and get run over by the wheel or not. I'm sorry, you can hear my pool in the background, the pool filler. So, and then also find out what the vendor's onboarding process is. So with some vendors, you need to kind of sign up for a time because they only have so many people, available for implementation or whatever. So just be aware if there is something where you kind of have to give your approximate dates in advance so you kind of save your space. You need to ask them what kind of prep work you need to do beforehand so that you can be ready and not have something kind of come up as a surprise that delays your whole plan. What kind of tools do they have available to help you transition, if any? And then also, if you need to schedule any trainings with your vendor, depending on the vendor, sometimes you have them come out in person or you do a webinar. And so get on the calendar for that too, if you feel like that's something you're going to need, because once again, also they probably have limited resources with training, except for on-demand things. Find out if they have any on-demand resources available now so you can start taking a look. Then, because NEMSIS has a new defined list available in 3.5, our recommendation was to have the agencies find out in their specific product that they're going to use, how is that going to be shown before they start configuring everything, and figure out if they really like how that's going to work or they want to stick with potentially how they already have it set up. The next big step, obviously, is contact your state data manager, because agencies shouldn't go to 3.5 unless their state is going to be accepting 3.5 or they've made an agreement with the state that they can start early and not send data yet or whatever. So you need to get the target go live date from them. And also when they're going to stop accepting 3.4. So not just when they begin 3.5, but when is kind of your drop dead date for switching over, because you'll have to plan that. And sometimes that comes up with things way far in advance, like budget. So if you have to pay for training and that's part of your budget, then you'd want to find out if you have to, be on 3.5 by a certain time. The next thing is communicate with stakeholders with whom you exchange data. I know this one seems kind of obvious when you're a state data manager, but I don't think it always is. When you're an agency, you're really dealing with day-to-day things in the field and ease of entry. So think about in advance, if you're switching to 3.5, does this affect your billing, which is a really important thing not to interrupt. The data getting to the hospitals, if you're part of ET3, let your IT department know, especially some agencies host themselves still, or they need some kind of, IT needs to make sure that the security is at the right level or whatever. So other agencies, because agencies sometimes, depending on the vendor, exchange data between their partners. So maybe they run calls with another agency. If that agency is going to be on 3.4 still and you're on 3.5, it doesn't necessarily mean that it won't work, but you need to talk with them in advance and find out when they're going, or speak with your vendor and find out how that's going to be possible, or maybe it isn't for a while, and what your workaround is. And then other data exchanges, like we have some linkages and HIEs and things. So find out what you're going to do for that. And importantly, have a backup plan in case something goes wrong, especially for things like billing, where there's going to be a lot of people concerned very quickly.
Hey, Anne, could you scroll down a little? I think we're just seeing the top.
I'm so sorry
right now. That's okay. Thanks.
Is this large enough for everybody to see?
Yeah, I think the size looks good.
You can tell I'm not good at driving and talking at the same time. All right. So the second part is transition preparation. So after you've either figured out the first part, or at least, maybe have some of it done, hopefully, what is your agency's data collection plan? So for mine, I put look at what EC Peers requires because that's our database. But for obviously whatever state you're in, you're going to want to look at see what they require. And then what do you want to collect in addition to that? Most agencies collect additional things, whether they have whether they have questions that are just written on the fly that they have people answer, or other custom questions that may be available from their vendor or whatever that aren't required by the state. But agencies would want to consider what those are and make sure that they put those in whatever document they're going to create to know what they're going to be collecting and what they need to analyze, especially larger agencies when they start looking at their data down the road. And then determine any gaps. So, there's things like, for us, it would be our change log, but also, once again, because agencies collect things that we don't, I only have things in our change log and data dictionary that EC Peers is concerned with. A lot of agencies collect things that are outside of that. And so one resource we point them towards is the NEMSIS change logs and data dictionaries, and there's a gap analysis too, because it'll help them not forget that there's other things that they're going to need to transition over. And then, Lori, can you let me know if I'm running short on time so that I can skip, and I'll just kind of.
Yeah, you're good. We've got 2 more after you, but you can take like 8 or 10 more minutes if you need it.
Okay, I don't think I'll need that long, but I'll talk fast. I'm good at that. And then we ask them to consider any changes they may want to make. So a lot of times agencies realize that something hasn't been working really well for them, or they want to start collecting something. And depending on the size of the agency, we found actually larger agencies, it's harder to get, either because of the complexity of training multiple crews or whatever, it's harder to kind of implement changes just willy-nilly. So if you're going to make a change, or you've wanted to make a change, it might be a good time to make a change and just roll it into all the other changes that are happening, kind of rip the Band-Aid off kind of effect. And then also just make sure if there's custom elements required by your state, that your vendor has built them and have them available. Most of them would not have changed for 3.5, but those are the kind of things that are potentially vendor specific. And it's always helpful to pull some of your 3.4 data to find some examples of values that you use, especially for the elements that are changing, to make sure that you kind of think through what you need to make sure you have and what values you have on, and relabeling of values, things like that. So the agency data set, that kind of brings me into that. The agency should compile their data set, but also, they need to consider what their value labels are, what values are going to have on and off and that kind of thing.
Can you scroll down again, Ann?
So sorry.
It's okay. Thanks.
I'm going to remember right by the end of this presentation.
That's okay.
And then, update your data set accordingly. I know I'm mostly familiar, of course, with the product we use, and there is some you can go in and kind of turn things on and off. So if your vendor does that, or if you work with the team at your vendor to set that kind of thing up, realize it's a good time to, once you figure out what you want to collect, make sure you connect with whoever is the one that can affect those changes in your system, so that when you start writing your run form, which we'll talk about next, you actually have the right data elements and values that you want to work from. So the part that agencies like to skip to a lot of times is this one, which is why we don't have it as one of the first things, because they always the first thing is I want to build my run form, but there really is some thought that needs to go into it first. And so we recommend, and I think I've heard this from other states too, start with your 3.4 form. I know that's what we did, and then make a copy of it and start trying to make something similar with a similar flow, if possible. You don't really want to reinvent the wheel right now. And then make sure you've added your state's customized elements if they require any. If you have customized logic, tools, it should be visibility rules. I don't know if I corrected that on here or not. Update those accordingly. Any customized triggers, every system's different, but some of them have buttons that do autofills. Make sure to think about that. I know one of my agencies who's starting on the 3.4 has cleverly determined that because it's a little trickier to do DOA in 3.5, they created a button where their crews can just click it's DOA and it autofills it the way it's supposed to. So those kind of things to make it easier is a lot easier to think out in advance and give it some thought as opposed to trying to squish it in right before you go live. Okay, see, look, I'm remembering to go down. There we go. All right. These ones are pretty straightforward, but just, your business rules for your agency. I mean, it depends on your state. Our state has schema-tron rules, obviously, but states or agencies can do their own. Usually they're ones in addition to that, like if they're looking at mileage and we don't, that kind of thing. So, you may want to build your rules at the same time as your run form. It seems like extra work, but it's actually better because you can go in and you can simultaneously test things that aren't going right or figure out, maybe something goes off in the wrong order on your validation rules. And it's confusing for somebody who's going to try to correct that to figure out where their problem was. Same thing with the new data elements. Look at that for your validation rules, your closed call rules. If your state has a copy of their validation rules available before you've started, especially, you may want to download that, see what's available, and then edit those, even add your own, add on to it if there's other requirements you have for your agency. And because before you go live, your EPCR vendor will need to apply your schema, schematron, and then in our case, the Arizona schematron. Agency training. This is also not just if your vendor's training you, but most agencies are going to do some kind of training, especially with the new disposition. So make sure you get that on the timeline, so you're not trying to schedule it when a lot of people are on vacation or over the holidays or whatever. I know a lot of people like to go live on January 1st. So that's a really important one, to not try to schedule your training when most of your admin staff's out of the office. And then just confirm your go live date range, and onboarding schedule with your vendor to make sure everybody's on the same page, that they haven't had a delay, or, maybe there's a reason you'd prefer to hold off. If you can do customized PDFs, make sure to update those. Hospitals get customized PDFs. I know from us. Billing a lot of times wants certain information. So if you had any changes for 3.5, update those. If you have critical reports, update those new reporting system, or have your vendor help you with that if that's something your vendor generally builds for you. Same thing if you have live dashboards. I mean, I know not a lot of agencies have live dashboards, but some of them do, and they have them internal at least. So make sure that those either are updated, or that you have some kind of thing on there where it says that it's, doesn't include the current data, for the next 3 weeks or something until you get it updated. But make sure you don't forget that those could be completely out of sync with the rest of your information. Update your QA stuff, whether it's forms and questions and logic and reports, so that as 3.5 data is coming in, you can actually do your QA process on it. Because I know sometimes that can flip billing. And if you have any custom views, lists, worksheets, any other work aids, write those all down and try to just think through, are any of the changes you're planning on making going to affect those? Then we're almost done. Okay, so transition's really short, because if you did all your work up front, we were assuming that the agency is pretty good to go. We took a lot of this information that's on the sheet, by the way, from the fact that going through the process of going from version 2 to version 3 was a huge change. And also just agencies along the way over the years have transitioned vendors, and they end up going through a lot of this, even if it's the same version, they're transitioning vendors. So kind of thinking about all that, because a lot of agencies choose, at least in our state, to transition vendors if they're going to do it when they're transitioning versions. And I can see why they would do that, but it can be a confusing process because they're both learning a new system and trying to convert their data from before. So obviously testing, we recommend that agencies do some kind of preliminary beta testing, something that's not going to come to us if they have their own license, something that is, a dual entry. They still send us 3.4, but they would do 3.5 and maybe a demo agency within their system, but something where they can kind of test it out. We recommend they consider choosing one station or one crew or one shift, depending on the size of the agency, and then take feedback, any feedback and updates, and change their workflow kind of as they get information back. We also learned from version 2 to version 3 that it was, especially for large agencies, it's nice if you appoint one person from that crew or team or whatever to give feedback. So all the people on that crew would give feedback to that person would interact with whoever's managing the system, because otherwise you're going to get the same recommendation 3 times, and it's just it'll be a lot harder to keep track of. And then once again, communicate with your vendor regarding what you want to include in your export files, because you're going to need to update those. It seems like something really obvious, but a lot of times we've noticed that the reason agencies in our state aren't collecting our mandatory custom elements that are required in statute, they're on opiate overdoses, is because they are collecting them, but they didn't tell their vendor to include them. And the vendor's not going to automatically necessarily include custom elements in their export that was set up 4 years ago. So make sure that they talk to them about that. And then also, if they have field devices, that's one of the last things they need to do. You got to sync your field devices. Otherwise, half your crews are going to be on 3.4 and half will be on 3.5. I remembered almost every time now. Okay. So go live. So just telling them to, monitor their system. Once again, consider appointing one person from each crew, station, or shift. So if the agency's all on 3.5, to channel that feedback back to the person updating the system, it's going to make it more efficient, and they're not going to waste as much time fielding emails and calls that are the same question 6 times. And instead, they're going to be able to take that time to actually fix the issues and concerns. And then monitor your exports. We find this is also an issue. Some agencies do, but a lot of times they aren't keeping an eye on things and don't realize that stuff has been failing or for months. So we ask them to try to keep an eye on any return messages. I know that's an issue sometimes depending on how much access they have in the system to it in their product, but and then we do recommend they track any change requests they have from their crews that aren't urgent. Track it in a central location, like on a Trello board or whatever. Put it all together so that later on, you can look back, or they can refer to it, or if they have to go to a committee internally to decide on changes. And then let's see, your expert criteria, I tell the agencies, this is a great time to update it. If you have a delay of 5 days on your exports, this is a really good time to realize that, we're going more in the direction of 24 to 48 hours. So see if you can work that into your new workflow. Make sure that your ePCR gets resent if it's updated, if that's what you want, especially if you're doing more real-time initial sends. Do you have a minimum validation score? Anything like that. Make sure that's part of it in your new, your export setup and criteria. And last, pretty much, just monitor for failed exports, monitor for failed postings, monitor any weekly or monthly reports you either generate yourself or you get from your state, so that you don't end up with 6 months worth of data that is missing some bit of information. Am I almost out of time? I have one last page, but I can skip it.
Nope, you're good. Keep going.
Okay, this is the last page. So this is just our general suggestions. So we say, don't wait to the last minute. It's so easy to wait till last. Just get started with the first part. You can go as slow as you want, but the last thing you want to do is try to rush this. And things will always come up. I mean, COVID is not a great example because that lasted a lot longer than we expected, but things will come up and you want to be able to plan for that. Make updates. Do not ever make updates. So don't, it's under the don't category. Make updates or changes right before the system admins out. I think the states all pretty much have learned this the hard way if they've ever done it, but agencies don't always realize. It's not that you can't, but making a change on a Friday or the day before a holiday or when your administrator is going to be out for a couple days is not the best idea. Unless if you're fixing something small and you're sure it's going to work, but you might save yourself a headache if you do updates on like Tuesdays. And then we have a few do's. So do work with other agencies similar to yourself to build run forms, update tools, review data, exchange configuration, all that. So we tell agencies in our state, hey, we know pretty much who uses what vendor, who uses, who's a transporter, who's not, who's air agencies, those kind of things. So as much as possible, we'll try to connect agencies with someone similar to themselves so that they can work together and pool their resources. And I already have agencies that are doing this right now. They're working just on building a run form. It's not they can't edit it themselves later a little bit, but it allows them to build a much better tool out of the gate. So, don't be in a vacuum. Communicate with your leadership, your crews, your medical direction, your partner agencies, and any data consumers. Make sure they know your plan, what you're doing. You could send a monthly update, whatever. But as soon as someone gets confused or surprised, they may call you, they may call the state, and it just takes a lot more time than it needs to if you don't communicate. Control access. This is a big one. Control access to your draft, unfinished, untested run forms and tools. So a lot of times you have to build them in your live system. Label them really big with "do not use" or something, because crews are really good at finding the stuff that they think they're supposed to be using and they're not. And sometimes they start entering things. So it's really important as much as possible to control any of the stuff that is not finished and meant to be used in the field before it's fully tested. And last thing, I hate to say plan for the worst and hope for the best, but do develop contingency plans in the event that not everything goes as planned. So this is everything from providing run forms to hospitals, patient information needed for billing, patient information usually transferred to other partner EMS agencies, et cetera. If something's really going to mess up an agency's process, if it doesn't go off as planned, have a contingency plan in place. It may not be the most elegant way to do it or the most efficient, but it'll get you by and buy you some time with a little less pressure perhaps from above if things aren't going as you expected. And that is it for my tool.
Thank you so much, Anne. Super, super helpful. I want to introduce next Chad from Kansas. And Kansas was one of the first few states to start successfully submitting 3.5 data. So he has also some resources and some wisdom to share. Chad, are you available?
Yep, I'm here. Can you hear me all right?
Yep, we can hear you. Thanks.
All right, let me get to the right screen here. So I love a lot of the other things shared right there. I actually have already used Chip's PowerPoint with a number of agencies here in Kansas. So thanks for that, Chip. It's really great and wonderful. Can you guys see a Word document that says final patient acuity?
Yep, looks good.
Okay. So Kansas hasn't had anybody full-time in this position since about 2013, 14, somewhere around there. When Joe Moreland, who was in it for a long time, had retired. And so I'm just now back at a year with the state in this role. And so we've had a lot, but I'm not as fancy as some of you guys are with your design. So I'll show you a couple of quick things that we did as we were going through it. And from that, but we do have agencies live in our direct entry stuff on 3.5 now, with more coming on board, and that seems to be working very successful overall in our reporting and everything with that. So first, we didn't have a data dictionary, so I just threw this up there as one of the things in case there's any other states or people that don't have one. I can definitely send you what we've got together so far. It's in a Word document, so it's pretty easy to manipulate some of it, but we did need to create a data dictionary for Kansas as we were going through this that was visual, that people could see. So this is just an example of what that looks like. So I'm going to switch up here. And one of the other things, did it switch to an Excel document?
No, I'm still seeing the data dictionary.
Here we go. Let me do a new share then, and I'll see if this will work. And there we go.
Yeah, I can see that now.
Okay. So NEMSIS had like, I think 3 or 4 diagrams kind of showing how the dispositions and stuff would work. And so what we found with our initial agencies on is that there's some confusion at times in situations. And I think Chip alluded to some scenarios earlier, but that this seems to be one of the biggest challenges, is really understanding those dispositions and how they play out. So we've started creating more of those based on, we've used the original ones that NEMSIS had, and then we've started creating more just in an Excel document. So this document is fairly easy because obviously it's easy to click through the cells and highlight things as you want or adjust them. And then we have all of the ones at the bottom for a specific specific situations. So we can flip back and forth, adjust them as we needed. And then from a print standpoint, at a point where we go and print them and can share them, you'll see on the right, they still have a pretty good full page view where crews can see that as well. So nothing fancy, just trying to be simplistic, but we're working on more of these. And the expectation is we're going to have quite a few of them as we move forward on that we can put not only in our data dictionary, but we can share just with the agencies as they come on board. And we used Excel just because it was super easy to drop them in and keep some consistency with that pretty good. So that's one thing we've done. And then the last thing that I was going to share, and this one is very sloppy, but it's just, I'm a simple-minded person. And so this will just kind of let you into my mind a little bit. on how I had to visualize things when I was going through. So not only did we have to make our data dictionary that we hadn't had before, we wanted to make sure that we updated all of our validation rules and had that. We also wanted to make sure as to what we wanted within the state, what we felt about not values, pertinent negatives, and any additional comments. So this document here, you can see I stole this from somewhere. So the original document came from somewhere else, and then I just added some additional columns in them. And I can't remember where I got it from. But basically, as you work across the top, we had a field on whether this was a change or not. So it documented whether an element had changed or not. And then we had working across, this was national, this was state, and this is what the national has it listed as there. And then this is our validation rule column, our data dictionary column. The updated column is if we updated the validation rules with numbers, and I'll show you that here in a second. And then obviously the information related to the specific elements. And then J is how we feel at the state. So, national may have something that's required that we want mandatory, vice versa, all of that. So this is where we were putting it as a state. What we felt about not values with that element as a state, and the pertinent negatives, and then any comments. So as I scroll down here into some of the nuts and bolts of areas where you can see a lot more stuff. So you can see it's very confusing, but what it lets me do is look at each specific element in one page and scroll easily. And I can see that unit transport and equipment capability, eResponse 07 was a change because of some name stuff. And I can work my way across and see that, okay, the state, we want this to be the same. But if you look down at the next one, type of dispatch delay, we actually have that mandatory in Kansas. We want to know that, and response delay is mandatory. So I can see what national has it as. I can see what we have it as in Kansas. And then the blue on the left here just tells me that, yes, I've built the validation rules for it. The next one over is, yes, it's in our data dictionary, and I've got that built. The next one over is any rules that are not national rules. If they're state specific rules, we have tied a code to them. So this tells me what the state specific rule code is so that I know it's there as well. And then you can see on the right, moving across, just that we want it to be mandatory, that we don't want to allow any not values for our agencies in Kansas to use on their initial entry of it. And then any comments. So basically that they need to answer this. So this was just a simple tool that I did going through just to kind of help me have everything on one page that I could scroll through, and that I could make sure that, hey, I've got validation rules written for it. I've got it added to the data dictionary. Is there any changes that we need to make? And it's all in one spot. Because one thing that was confusing to me going through a lot of it, there were some resources out there, but you're bouncing back and forth. And so you're looking at a lot of different things. And so I did this and added some columns just so I could have it all in one place. When I sat down to work through anything, I would pull this up. And this is kind of what drove me as I was going through stuff. So my only advice to people is, we can sit here all day long and think of scenarios. We tried that and think we got a lot of them. But until you actually start getting some agencies moved over into reporting 3.5, you're not really going to know what you're going to run into with some of that stuff. And so our biggest piece in Kansas was we knew that we felt comfortable with where we at, but we knew we needed to get some agencies on board. And we had some agencies that are very forward thinking and know that, hey, we're going to come on board, but there's still going to be some more changes as things move forward. And so my recommendation is get some agencies in the system utilizing it, or getting data to you so you can really see where some of those hiccups are and things that need to be updated and corrected. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Perfect. Really great advice. Thank you, Chad. And our last presenter today is Cassie, who was previously with the state of Georgia, although if everyone doesn't know, she recently stepped down from that role. So she's here today just as an independent agent, and she has shared some documents, which we will post on the link I provided by the end of the week. But today she wanted to just share a little bit of best practices. Cassie, are you here?
Hi, Laurie. Can everyone hear me?
We can. Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me. The documents Laurie does have, of course, I can't present them because they're no longer mine, but I did share those at the DMC meeting and in several meetings in the past. Chip, I'm sorry, they are PDF, unfortunately. If you would like the non-PDF version, I will be happy to share with Laurie who to contact at the state of Georgia. But today I just wanted to share some of what I consider to be best practices since I know I started working on this early last year. One of the things that I can say that that no one has really pointed out, but you need to keep in mind is your audience. All of your training material, all of your guidance documents, you need to tailor them to each individual audience because the agency administration may not look at your guidance documents the same way a medic does. And a lot of times I have found being a medic myself is the agency doesn't always communicate everything as clear and accurate as it should be. Most of the time they blame it back on the state. Well, the state says you have to do it, so you have to do it. So what the state of Georgia was doing and what I was doing to help them was I created multiple different documents. One of the guidance documents may be tailored towards the agency itself, where other guidance documents and flyers was tailored towards the medic themselves. Because let's be honest, sometimes we have to put ourselves in a medic's shoes at 2 o'clock in the morning. A medic's not going to look at e-disposition.12 and go, oh, I know exactly what that is. No, they need plain English. They need to know what you want from them so they know that they're documenting it correctly. And in one of the documents that I sent Laurie, like Chip had said earlier, it accounts for the whole run. When they have a patient that, what color were they? Were they yellow? Were they green? Were they black? Were they dead on arrival? And I give examples because, again, not everybody views the documents the same way, where some need to see an example, some may not. So that was one of the lessons that I learned early on, was making sure that my material was appropriate for the right audience. The second thing is communication. Communicate. And that I know that everyone is busy. Our day-to-day life gets very hectic, but the more we can put it out there, the more we can communicate why we're changing, what the change is going to do, what the change is going to do on an individual level, on a state level, on research level, the better chances you're going to get at buy-in. You know, the saying is everyone resists this change. Well, I have found over the past that people are more reluctant to resist that change if you communicate effectively with them. That's internally. That's with your stakeholders, such as your EMS agencies. That is the medics too, because once again, all the changes that you're going to make, it doesn't only affect you as the state. It doesn't only affect the agencies, but it affects the medic, the one who's out there running the calls, the one who's out there documenting this. And if you want efficient and effective documentation, then loop them in so they understand why they're documenting everything that they're documenting. And by all means, if anyone ever wants just a second viewpoint or a peer reviewer, please feel free to email me anytime. I'm always open to helping anyone that I can. And thanks again, Laurie, for inviting me.
Thank you, Cassie. Great to have you here. Do you want to put your personal email in the chat if you get a second? People may not have that.
Yes, ma'am. I'm doing that now.
That is all we have planned for today. We are right at time, so good timing there. And I just want to say thank you so much for everyone who has created these resources and shared them. I know we had a little bit of time to do this at annual meeting and we got really positive feedback on it. So we wanted to provide some more time and an opportunity for you all, the experts, to help teach each other and share with each other. So thank you for everyone who shared. If there's other people on the call that have resources you've created or in the process of creating, please reach out to me if you would like those also to be shared or posted. We'd be happy to do that. And we will work on collecting these. I know some of them are not quite in final drafts yet, but we will do our best to get an editable form posted on the link I provided by the end of the week. And you can be looking for that. And this training will be recorded and it will be posted on our website under calls and trainings, as well as on our YouTube channel, if you want to refer back to it. Chris, anything else?
No, I think you covered it.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, everyone. See you soon.